researcher or an observer to start capturing data and the like. So I hope I'm going to try to be as neutral or as unbiased as possible. But as you can see, we're starting to send out some survey questions. One of the things I think that I don't want to overdo is to start sending out surveys on a regular basis, but to start capturing data that we can use for the papers, open up some new channels of data collection, and start adding a little bit more rigor to what we're doing right now. So leadership was obviously the first point. One of the agenda items I'd like to put on here is how this group envisions capturing more data as we go through this process. But you guys are all elected, so now it's how are you guys going to govern? To be honest, what's the governance style you guys going to approach? Safe started a list. There are a bunch of agenda items that the group has been sending over. So it's basically now there's a leadership group. How's it going to function? By fiat, by council, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to kind of step back and just kind of plant those seeds and see where things go and observe.
A quick protocol question. Is this YouTube link been posted to the meetings channel or anything like that yet?
Should we or okay. Okay, so because I had that question, like, do we want to make these meetings like private and then we share them like after they're done?
I would start by
That's
making
one of the questions.
The extent to which transparency is there is,
Oh,
if they get posted after the fact.
They, I'm not sure exactly how that works actually.
So here is actually so that I shared in our that's the YouTube link, and we could share it in the meeting groups. What do you guys think? Like, do we want to have like a private meetings, or is it like?
We have two reasonable options. One is to actually share the meetings, or the other is to sort of write up minutes of what transpired afterwards. You need some sort of accountability.
I think logistically, it's probably just easier to share the meeting.
All right. So let's start there. So go ahead and put in the meetings.
Okay.
Sure. You got him.
If you can just keep notes though on what you guys are starting to talk about.
Sure. Of course, they always wake up right when you're starting to do something.
Okay. Oh. Okay. So I started some some issues. It doesn't necessarily mean that I support those those points, but it was like things that I considered we could try to do differently and like stir up some controversy. So like and I don't know, like maybe it's like things that we could try to discuss and like try to I don't know, create some change to like to kind of see like how for instance if we have somebody that's pushing like a certain agenda, how would it play out? What do you guys think?
Do you mean in general where to start? Is that the question?
So okay, so I posted some issues, and maybe what I'm thinking is that should we discuss right now like some of the issues that we posted? Let the crowd also decide what issues are important because I think people haven't voted for them,
right.
And we're also waiting for the crowd to provide more input.
Right. I mean, one of the objectives of the leadership board was to be able to move some of the overall governance agenda items forward. So I think what we could do is we could just talk about what are some of the hot topics or the high-level topics that are things that we would like to decide sooner that will inform what we're doing going forward, and just figure out even just a few things that we would like to make a decision on a mock decision during this week? What could we do this week to move that agenda forward? Michael, from a paper perspective, are there things that you envision that you would like us to have completed or have a read on before we get to that deadline?
I'm trying to load the Meteor site and having trouble doing so, actually. I'm not certain whether any of the items that I recall seeing there could be currently listed as sort of core contributions, just because none of them have been implemented in any way yet. So from the perspective of a paper, I'm not sure it will make a huge difference. My inclination would be to pick the thing that is most important that we decide first, sort of regardless of the deadline.
Got it. I mean, one of the things about being the leadership board is that we do get to kind of pick and choose if there's something that we feel is important or we want to address now. So we can just do that.
So work dynamics, is that the category?
It is.
So questions around.
So work dynamics, I focus more on work dynamics for our platform. So in the terms that, for instance, if we're doing research, we could suddenly pick up a style that is similar to how a company works, right? Where we say, okay, if you didn't meet the deadline, you're going to be fired. And so I was just exploring, like if we started to consider that you might have people that want other types of dynamics, like how would the leaderboard resolve that some people want other types of work dynamics, etc. But it was all focused on our platform.
Mm-hmm. I mean, okay, so looks like there are questions around how anonymous should you be able to be. Minimum wage. Should we have minimum wage?
Minimum wage is a good hot topic.
I think that or profit versus non-profit are certainly, there's a lot to dig into there. Minimum wage isn't a bad idea to talk about them. I think I wrote that. Others here? What do you think? Should we pick up a discussion of wage floors or something around whether this kind of thing will eventually need to be a nonprofit versus a for-profit? Sure, Martin? Any thoughts?
I knew cats were quiet. I didn't know they were this quiet.
I heard momentary blips of audio from Shirish. But they were wise. What I heard was quite wise.
So you guys, so I was thinking about the form of the governments, more related to how we were doing research, but you guys think that it should be more related to the platform, correct? Like work dynamics for the platform, not for how we are doing the research.
I would think of it in terms of the platform, yes. I think this should be about making decisions about how the platform functions.
Okay. So then I'm probably then going to eliminate then the all of the work dynamics that were related more to the the research dynamics.
I mean, I don't. If there's something that somebody's particularly passionate about, it's still a good opportunity for them as a researcher to have a voice. I don't know that we necessarily need to take them out. we may not necessarily want to solicit to that extent, but you know, I think in a lot of ways you're right. If we're looking to have people upvote things that are important to them, the actual process is just as important as the platform, right?
Sure. So, from my perspective right now, I think the goal is to pick something, anything that's worthwhile to discuss, and dig into it. I don't care as much exactly about what it is, other than it being important and something that influences a lot about the design of the platform.
Okay. In that case, I think nonprofit profit or minimum wages, I think, are both really good things that we need to discuss at some point. So now is as good a time as any.
Okay. Why don't we start with minimum wage questions? Just because I feel like the profit nonprofit thing may stretch on, and well, they both would stretch on. But I mean, it's I have a feeling there's a stronger opinion, a stronger consensus on. I don't know. I propose I make a motion that we try the minimum wage thing.
Before we do that, Martin just put through a note that he's having a hard time understanding the language. So is it possible for us to have a bilingual meeting and maybe we could get some translation happening?
Sure. Like I could communicate with him, but I think Martin should try. I think Martin should give it a try. I don't know.
Can you hear us, and it's just that your outgoing voice that's breaking?
Yay, he'll try, he says.
Okay.
I mean, our alternative would be to do it over Slack, but I think it would be more difficult to arrive at consensus. That's been my experience.
What you're using. Are you arriving at consensus? Is there a leader?
Okay, so but what if we set out right now maybe some tasks so that maybe the meeting is a little bit easier, perhaps. So I had understood a little bit differently what the goal of what the issues were going to be. But like now that we define, okay, the issues are going to be related with the platform. Maybe we can all like so some of the tasks that we can start doing is all of us start to think about issues and start posting them on Mediator, and also ask the crowd to start creating the issues, and then maybe later on we have another meeting to discuss the issues that are important. What do you guys think?
I think we have plenty of issues that we could kick off and tackle now. I'm not against what you're suggesting, but I'm not against what you need to waste this meeting.
Yeah, I definitely think we have a couple of short things that we could at least start talking about. I mean, would you be interested in discussing minimum wage?
Sure. I'm trying to figure out. Is my voice breaking for any of you, or is it just streaming?
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Well, then I suggest you dig in, and you can always swap around with channel. Three suggests that we turn off our webcams for a moment. See if that helps. Right. So let's try minimum wage. So this is a thing that has really divided the Catholic Church in our conversations with them. it's sort of the traditional economic argument that higher wages mean that people spend more money, so there's more jobs to go around, versus having minimum wage means that there will be fewer jobs. And for better or for worse, a lot of workers who are extremely active feel that there's a massive minimum wage and that they're doing perfectly fine finding jobs that are actually paying well, and that it's also impossible to have a global minimum wage. That makes sense. And so how do you even enforce that? That's their take. It's not one I think I agree with, but it is, I think, a point of view that needs to be contended with. On sort of pro-minimum wage, I think that's an important way that you can ensure respect for workers, that you can ensure that you don't get a market for lemons. And I think that it's also a way to avoid being exploitive, essentially. So just for the sake of having an argument, I'm going to come down on pro-minimum wage. However, I don't, and just for a starting point, I'm going to put down a suggestion that we find something that is a global wage. I think we would either want that or something by country.
Jay Silver and I were talking about this the other day, and we had talked about it doing it regionally on some level, because one of the things we had discussed is that in having a minimum wage, if we had a global minimum wage and it was too high, then we would be pricing out requesters in other parts of the globe. But if we had one that was too low, then we would be keeping out some of the more developed workers. And so what our thought process was that if we create a minimum wage regionally, we have an opportunity to also appeal to local requesters and local workers, and to work in those individual regions as well on both sides.
So you're basically suggesting something where I can make an explicit choice to outsource, to another country as a lower minimum wage if I want to. What I find in practice in Upwork, as an example, is that language issues really get in the way. It's not always worth it. But you're saying that we should empower people to have that flexibility in particular, because otherwise you might price out requesters. I think that that's an interesting point of view.
Well, and it's also really, if we have a regional minimum wage, it also creates an opportunity for requesters in developing countries to be able to have access to that same labor force. Because if we have an opportunity to not just feed the developed machine, but to also feed the machinery of the developing countries through this platform in more than just on the worker side, I think that that could be interesting and impactful.
I mean, something we could do is tie the minimum wage to the minimum wage wherever the requester lives. I'm just sort of playing with ideas here. That would allow developing regions to have, to post anything worldwide at rates that they find reasonable. I'm not sure it necessarily makes sense.
I think that would be unfair for the requester, right? Because you would be paying certain workers more for, you would be paying them perhaps for a living that is much higher perhaps than the work that they're actually doing. If that makes sense. And one thing that I was thinking right now is, for micro tasks, how do you match? For instance, let's say you have a federal law that states what is the minimum wage. If you're doing micro tasks, how do you how do you find what is that value? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So I think there are, right, so that's an important question. There are, I think, a few different ways to go about it. One is sort of, if it's a sufficiently macro task, we lost Shirish, I see. And you're, say, contracting on the outcome, then it can essentially be, here's an estimate of the number of hours it will take, and here, like, that kind of thing becomes more direct, even if they're if they're a bad estimator, then they'll just get bad reviews. With micro tasks, there are a few different ways to go. One would be to use something like the ETA paper we published at CHI this year, where the idea was that we had people do the task under different time constraints to figure out how much time someone actually needs in order to do the task, and you can use that to estimate the wage. Another approach would be to use, say, that first milestone, especially in sort of a microtest scenario, as a mechanism for seeing, in practice, how long this takes. Am I talking into a void?
No, I think we, in some ways, we almost have to figure out, I mean, so many of the tasks, there is going to be a variety of time. I mean, in the paper that you did you find that there was a reasonable estimate, or for certain tasks, or did you find that the more macro the task became, the more variety of time it took to complete? And how does that factor in?
Yeah, so maybe I can show better than I can tell. Give me one sec. There's no single time by which everyone will have done it, but there's a distribution. There's like a curve. What you can do.
Yeah, I just didn't know how big the deviation was on it, and does that deviation increase proportionally as you get more macro?
Yes. The longer the task takes, the larger that deviation becomes. I'll share my screen briefly, just so you can see. The curve looks something like this, where this is a micro task where it will just take anywhere between 1 and probably 3 seconds for most people to finish it per task.
Mm-hmm.
But if it starts taking 1 minute, 2 minutes, this curve gets stretched out. And then what you do is you basically have to pick a point at which you think it's fair. You can say that if 80% of people can do this in that given time, that's the effective wage that it should be. So if it's like this time at 10, this is the time it takes 90% of people. 90% of people can do it in this time or less. So if you say it takes let's just say 2.5 seconds, then you can multiply that out and say how many of those do you do per hour, and then you can just say what's the wage what's the minimum wage for the region that I'm targeting. Let's say it's $10 an hour or something like this, and then you know how much you have to price each individual task. I'm not saying this is a good way to go, but it's a way to go. The alternative, I'll stop screen sharing. The alternative is to basically rely more on self-report, or to somehow have a set of people who essentially screenshot themselves in that first milestone, so that we can trust their times.
Trigva is chiming in, and he has a thought that I think is interesting.
Instead of
charging people or requesters by task, why not go out into the market and offer up subscriptions? So a requester would, for a certain amount of hours or whatever a certain figure would just pay the crowd a lump sum, and then we could figure out arrive at our own metric for paying people.
How
It
do we
gives
know
us
what the lump sum would be?
what's that?
How do we know what the lump sum would be?
Oh, I mean, again, just spitballing now, but we could arrive at some sort of a metric, just like when people are using contract workers or temp workers, the industry now bears a certain number. We could, artificially create a baseline and create a mission statement around it to justify the return.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's an interesting point of view. So just to sort of add some color to this, have you heard of the Cosean floor?
No, I have not.
So there's this guy Coase, who's now celebrated as an important contributor to economic theory. At the time, he was not really paid much attention to. And he asked this question of, like, when should you create a firm and when should you go to a market?
Yes.
The idea is basically saying, when should I go out to a place like eBay or Craigslist or whatever, versus when should I, hire someone and keep them internal to me. You can imagine that they're more reliable then, but it's possible that it would cost me more, that kind of thing. So I'm trying to pull up sort of a concise definition that I could send out here. It basically has to do with whether you have large variability or it's very sort of commoditized. If it's very variable, you may want to do it within a firm, because then as a firm we can absorb the differences. So for example, if we, the Crowd Marketplace, are on average able to figure out how much a thing should cost, but there is some variability, then we just pay people however long it takes them. We absorb any cost if we underestimate, and sometimes we'll overestimate, and more or less hope that it works out. Like we basically absorb the we price things back to them, and then we absorb any noise.
Yeah. And as we get better at it and more repetitions, will be a little more on point. But I think the advantage then to the crowd worker is that we can now create a different relationship between them and the requester.
Yeah, I mean that's right.
If we're looking to empower the worker, I think that was really one of the initial drivers here to create that trust-power dynamic. If we can kind of maybe fluctuate on how that remuneration is extended to them, then we have the world then becomes our oyster with regards to scale and continuing the training, but just a good positive feeling that the workers will have.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my only question is, how automated is that from a process perspective? What then becomes the responsibility? I mean, are we kind of creating bureaucracy to an extent in doing that? It seems like it could potentially fundamentally change our role, which I believe we've mostly been leaning towards being relatively hands-off, except for mediation.
Yeah, it
so
does.
Contemplating is that, do we want to be involved? Do we want to have a staff that negotiates contracts with requesters for work?
It literally would turn us into something like a contract shop or a consultancy.
Right.
Right. You talk to us. You tell us what you want done. We give you a bid, basically. Right. And then we just hire whoever we can out of the crowd to fulfill that bid. I think there could be a very successful model in there, just for the sake of argument. You're right that it may or may not be the model that we've been pursuing. or that we want to pursue.
One of the things to think through again is, are there other ways of creating that middleman? Could it be that being the middleman is another job in the platform that someone can opt for?
Mm-hmm.
And then it still stays of the platform and not of us. Like, could we create a job that's basically a broker? I know that I think it might have been James earlier that was talking about in breaking down tasks and requesters who are not comfortable with coding, and about possibly having someone be there to kind of walk them through the process and say, okay, what is it that you want to do, and doing the decomposition into actual tasks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is it possible for that to be a job on the platform?
Neil points out that these kinds of things can be done using mechanism design. So, like, for example, second price auctions, these kinds of things. That's how Google AdWords works, is that,
Right.
basically multiple people will basically look at it, bid on a job. Then the top person wins and pays as much as the second most person offered, which is incentive compatible. It would slow things down a lot potentially, unless it were strongly categorized. So it's like, I'm automatically going to bid on any image labeling task this much whenever I'm online. So I basically place my bids as a worker, and then the system automatically wins auctions from me whenever it can.
Will that create a problem as far as the work actually getting done potentially? People claiming work and then not completing?
That's already a challenge.
Oh, really?
Less Mechanical Turk, but certainly Odesk.
Yeah.
So Michael, I know I floated the idea a couple of times about mission, but Al and I were spitballing an idea, and I'm not sure if this deviates or gets us a little bit further down a road. But Al and I were just kind of running through some numbers and looking at the map. That the crowdsource idea, the concept. It has some appeal, I think, from a macro level. We were talking about potentially, how about engaging some larger international, entities that could use crowdsourcing as a tool to stabilize areas, like the high unemployment, the economic turmoil that's going on in Spain, Greece, Italy. There's a lot of skilled workers there that don't have local work. So as a solution to provide work to stabilize those situations, we could provide a mechanism to certain international bodies to, as a mission to help. We get workers. That pool, we can activate them, put them to work, and then align them, and then requesters know they have access to this mature labor pool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that could be really good. I have a feeling that the thing that we would need to work first to prop up is the worker side. Is the requester side. I think we will need to get work onto the platform. I think it will not be hard to get people, especially some good workers who are disaffected with Upwork and Mechanical Turk, to try out the platform and be willing to do work. Okay. But I think our major challenge will be to essentially start finding clients.
Okay. And has any thought been given to that particular undertaking?
I think we've chatted about it a few times, but we don't have anything lined up because we don't know exactly when the thing's going to launch. So we can't guarantee, we'll do your thing for you in 2 weeks because we don't have it. Neil's pointing in the meeting channel a few things about how the economics of this are working, and TaskRabbit basically gives money back if anything goes wrong.
I think it might be worth spending some time or maybe creating a milestone to have folks sort of brainstorm about that if we're at a point where, we have the time and the bandwidth to do that, it might be good to just kind of put it in the queue somewhere.
What in particular? Sorry.
No, just about, getting requesters into the platform and just what that would kind of be like.
I think it will be. Yeah, I have mixed feelings about when's the right time to do it. I think we're going to have several different pushes. One where we basically are, once we're alpha, we may want to put something through just to sort of see whether we can go end to end, and I can probably provide some tasks for that. But then as we start to scale up, it's going to be sort of a multi-step process.
Yeah.
Well, I would propose that we focus first on the worker and requesters both sides, and not focus on the tasks at present, because focusing on all platform from end to end will probably put everyone into a dry state.
Okay, so concretely, what would you suggest we decide here?
I think if we would have chosen workers side in the first week itself, and then focused on the requester side in the second, then it would have panned out better. But since we have already gotten over that time, so we can focus on requester and worker at this moment, probably till by the end of this week, and then we can focus on the task workflows and how the tasks are authored by requesters.
So just to make sure I understand, I'm going to echo this back. I want to make sure that when I say it back, I'm saying the same thing that you think you're saying. You're saying we should proceed in this debate about minimum wage and how that all works by sort of first taking the perspective of a worker, then taking the perspective of a requester, and sort of working at them individually, and then trying to synthesize? Is that what you were saying?
Well, on the wage side, what my proposal is that we have to look from the different geographies. If we are looking for a minimum global wage, I want to know whether we are considering that as minimum of a minimum for each country or geography, or is it a minimum which should be applicable for almost all the people participating in the platform.
So you're suggesting that we basically poll around different parts of the world to see what each of them think?
Yes, the thinking behind that is that each geography has a different economic style, and so there might be differences in how we come up with a minimum global wage, which might not be apt for almost all the geographies together. So if we are considering that minimum global wage is like a minimum wage for each geography, then I think then I'm okay with the concept of minimum global wage.
So at least for the sake of a mock leadership board making some progress, I'm relatively convinced that doing something region by region would make sense. I think it really would be difficult to do something worldwide for a number of very difficult socio-political reasons. So let me ask this then: if we were to go down the route of having a minimum wage per region, let's say by country, do we make it? How do we decide what that is? Do we just sort of by default make it whatever the minimum wage is in that country by law, and then whenever that law changes, we update ours?
I think there's a lot to be said for that just from a regulatory perspective. I mean, if we really want to be global and we want to play nice in a lot of areas, then playing by local rules and customs, I feel, is important.
So one thing that becomes challenging about that is minimum wages can differ all the way even to city level. In practice, how do we deal with that? Do we just start by doing it sort of country by country? and then if that's working, then go from go from there.
Another aspect to this is that if we consider based on the category of tasks which each worker is working on, so we can come out with a minimum like minimum wage for that kind of task. So if we are seeing that a particular category of task is handled by one set of geography or maybe a set of geographies, so we can decide on a minimum wage for that kind of task. And or also we can use minimum wage as a concept for driving more work towards the larger population.
I'd just like to add one data point here. I didn't realize this. Odesk has a global minimum wage. This was updated in November of 2014. It's $3 an hour. I think that probably highlights the challenge of doing one global wage.
And Michael, this is tricky, but do you know, does the World Fair Trade Organization, do they deal with this particular issue?
I do not know.
Okay, because the Free Trade Act that is applied well in the consumer world. That people actually seek out products that have this seal of endorsement. If we could create, a certain level or a quality, maybe it's artificial. Let's just say we decided that we've worked through all the complications and announced that we are offering up a fair and equitable wage. That I think that appeals to a lot of requesters or to a lot of folks that want to come down on the side of right and justice. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's some very large international conglomerates out there that could use some good PR right now, and we certainly wouldn't mind giving it to them, would we?
True.
So yeah, there's some complications, but if we could arrive at some sort of happy medium, a calculator of sorts that takes into account the activity, the location, maybe even a certain level, some thresholds and the like, almost maybe even take in some of the logic that large equity firms use when they use some of their black box trading, when they do trading with the sun. Perhaps we can reinvent some of that trading logic to arrive at a calculus here.
Mm-hmm.
Again, just spitballing an idea.
I really love that idea, and I think we could use it a lot to play with whether or not we want to do like a social business, because we can present our platform as we're a platform that can help you give work to people that to these countries that maybe are suffering this economical crisis. And you are also ensuring maybe that you're giving them a fair wage, and so like all of that could play into how we, if we want to go towards that path of being a social business, and I think that's also a cool point that we could discuss. Like if we want to be this type of social business, and for the wages. Maybe it could also be about, so one thing that I was considering right now is the cost of the internet is not necessarily the same for all countries. And the minimum wage might be less in certain countries where the internet is much more expensive. For example, in Venezuela, I think the cost of the internet is very high, but the minimum wage is very low. And so we have to consider like some of those factors, and maybe also like if we want to give people fairness, it could also be about like we could even try to ensure that our workers have a certain lifestyle. I think that would be like that could be very cool. Like to say that all of our workers maybe have enough money to buy a car or I don't know. But I really love that idea about like giving people the option of using our platform for like these social good tasks.
I think that is a good point raised by Saif. So if we are targeting the online platform, so that should at least handle the cost of internet at minimum.
I agree that taking the cost of internet into account in formulating whatever that local minimum wage is also important. I agree.
So, I mean, I think what we need is, I'm very much, as sort of both in research and in practice, about having clear, simple messaging. I think there's a simple message that can be said that is, you know, as a worker, you will get, there is a minimum wage. It is whatever the minimum wage is in your country. And you can tell that to the requester as well. I think when we start to have complex calculations, I think it needs to be something that we can explain clearly. Like it's a form, it's basically minimum wage, cost of internet, just those two things. Or
yeah,
plus,
that's it.
Yep.
Agreed.
I mean, the raw cost, there will be presumably some overhead fee that the platform will need to levy in order to pay the reviewers and these kinds of things. But yes.
But if you use mission as marketing, just like consumers pay a premium for free trade goods, again, if that is part of our mission and we market it accordingly, then there's an expectation that those sorts of services, that sort of commitment, there tends to be a markup, and it's a well-justified and explained markup that consumers are willing to absorb, either to soothe their conscience or to contribute or whatever, but it is an opportunity for us to maybe have a little more flexibility with marking up and passing on some of these costs to the consumer.
Just a cautionary tale, there have been several crowdsourcing marketplaces that have tried to be have a social mission like this,
Okay.
and they have not typically taken off. There's not the demand for them. And it's possible that it's just inevitable that, like, basically, online work is about bottom of the barrel, cheap stuff, but I don't believe that's the case. My sense is you have to change the equation a little bit in some other way. The argument that I've used with colleagues recently has been that crowdsourcing has sort of grown up around a world where you don't trust anyone, and so you ask for 5 votes and then take the average, because anyone could be messing with you. But if you could ask 2 people and pay each of them 2.5 times as much, then all of a sudden now you're talking about something where if those people are high quality, you're paying them a living wage, and you're getting higher quality results out of it. So I guess at the highest level, I just want to push back a little bit and indicate we need to take the requester point of view that if, like, a social entrepreneur, like a business that has, or a nonprofit that has a social mission is good, but if it prices itself out of the market, that it does nobody any good.
Agreed.
Hey, Michael, what were some of those cautionary tales, aka failures?
I'm not sure I would call them quite failures, just that they've been certainly pivoting quite a bit. There was one of the papers I had us read from MobileWorks, has tried for a number of years, had a very pro-social mission to it, and now it's pivoted several times. Now it's called Lead Genius. I think it struggled to take market share away from places like Mechanical Turk.
Was it mostly microtasks, though?
Yes.
Yeah.
But, I mean, macrotasking, we'll see. I mean, they're a little bit more macrotasky now. Now that they're Lead Genius, they've adopted. My inclination, I'm not sure exactly what the lesson is to learn there. I guess my point is that I think there is a markup that people are willing to pay to soothe their conscience. I would argue just to get better results, but I'm not sure it's like a huge markup. On the other hand, I'm not sure that we're proposing one, a huge markup.
Just enough. Just enough.
I think some of it also goes to the idea of who and what the requesters are. I mean, my understanding is that a lot of the micro tasking work, there's a lot of academic work. I don't know what the percentages are. Do you know what the percentages are, for example, on MTurk, of academic requesters versus commercial requesters?
So it's sort of a little bit difficult. So first of all, we don't really know.
Yeah.
Second, here's basically, I think, the conclusion. There are many in number. There are many academic requesters in number, but in volume, they are tiny collectively. So it's like they're very visible because they're all over the place. It's like a bunch of flies. Like, everyone needs to write their master's thesis or, all these kinds of things. However, one gigantic job to be done by Twitter or Google, or casting words or any of these places, just totally dwarf that volume.
Right, so the volume of work itself is still mostly commercial.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that if there was a push towards changing who the consumer, meaning who the requester is, and the nature of the work that they were having done, do you think that if that became more macro or more sophisticated, that could potentially give us some more room for that markup to fund some of these other elements that we're trying to fund? And by fund, I simply mean have enough money to not price us out, but have this fair trade option and pay for the reviews and to the maintenance elements of what we're trying, the cost of maintaining the system the way we want.
I think there's a possibility. I think people will give us the benefit of the doubt. I do think that we're going to have to pay very close attention to how much markup we're introducing.
Agreed.
What is how much markup is organic, for example?
Yeah, I mean, my thinking is just as when the time to complete, the deviation obviously increases as you go macro. I feel like that markup margin also has a slightly larger deviation as we get more macro, and it might be just enough of a buffer to keep us alive the way we want to be.
Mm-hmm. That's very possible.
Does that make sense?
So people will become less price sensitive when you're going more macro.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So are we at a relative consensus that we are looking for some sort of minimum on a regional basis?
Sure. How do we say that we agree with this?
I think we vote and agree, and we be proud that at our first meeting we came to a consensus on something of significance.
Okay. So, and do we agree on a mechanism for that regional price, or is that still up in the air?
I think that we are in agreement that we would like to have something that takes into account minimum wage and internet cost. I think we just need to do a little bit of research to actually figure out what that would mean. Like, are there areas where the internet is so much more than the minimum wage that the macro task for that hour couldn't sustain that? I think we need to do a little research to see will we price ourselves out of macro in certain areas or not.
So
just to be sure.
What if I made the following motion? I motion that the platform have a minimum wage that is tied to each country's minimum wage. We leave open the opportunity to adjust that based on the price of internet according to some sort of cost investigation we would need to do in the future. But for now, it is just the minimum wage. And Jay Silver has a chocolate and coffee, but I will not include that in my motion. Although I will laugh.
Chocolate and coffee.
Oh. So, can I get someone to second the motion?
I second that motion.
All right. How do we vote? Do we do it in the Slack channel for a record?
Although the Slack doesn't keep a record for very long. I think the recorded, if we just say our name and whether we vote yes or no, and then if you want to just read Jay Silver's vote from the Slack, I think that will be sufficient record.
All right. There will be a record on the. All right. So then I will start. I'm Michael Bernstein. I vote yay.
I'm Allison Cassette. I vote yay.
I'm safe. I vote yay.
I Shirish vote yay.
Now we have to take down the ones who have.
Also, guys, if we're considering the cost of internet also as a factor, so are we also thinking on the lines that when the internet cost goes down, so then that minimum wage goes down as well?
It's a good question. I'm not immediately proposing that, although I'm very open to that.
Michael, we have a vote from Jay Silver on the Slack.
Okay, what about Daniel?
Jay Silver has voted yay on the Slack.
Yeah, what about Daniel?
I do not see anything on the Slack from Martine.
So to be clear, then we're still looking at the cost of labor, even though our conversation is talking about the cost of living.
Yes, I mean, basically we are trusting each country, at least for the moment, to adequately assess its own people's cost of living and to set their country's minimum wage appropriately.
Okay.
Now, in a country like the U.S., that's obviously inaccurate, and that's why local cities, states, and counties have their own minimum wages that are higher than the federal one. But I think at least for a first shot, this is doing the right thing.
And actually, right now I was thinking, wouldn't the workers also help us maybe like when like to calculate the cost of the cost of the internet, for instance, for tasks that like might require high bandwidth. If it's too expensive for them, it's not worth it. They would just not take up the task, right? So like, maybe we don't even have to look into that. Like the crowd would tell us.
In theory, yes.
As a wild and crazy idea, have we considered maybe partnering with a telecom provider and or a computer manufacturer?
We have not pursued that yet. Was it Megha or someone suggested that we consider partnering with G Silver, partnering with Internet.org?
Okay.
Yeah. I think Mohammed had mentioned that as well.
No, Mohammed, yeah. Okay, so actually I did find, I'm going to post this into Slack in the meetings channel.
So it's internet.org.
There's the link I just posted in is cost per megabit, I think, megabit per second.
Okay.
If you go about like a quarter of the way down. So, you know, Greenland, super expensive.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what to do with this, but it's something that we could utilize.
And it's just another data point that if some folks are going to start configuring a calculus of some sort or a calculator, perhaps we can, you know, still keep it simple, but come up with a nice, fair solution.
Yeah, I mean, so it's this article shows for a megabyte, how many megabits per second you get. How much you have to pay for that many megabits per second. So the problem is that like that's a very U.S. centric way of looking at it. Like in Africa, I believe you top off, like you actually pay per megabit, essentially. Anyway, yes, it's an interesting
Okay.
Okay. Cool. So should we take a moment and reflect? What a great trick of that. What do you recommend that we do?
So it looks like the leadership group has arrived at, okay, we're going to work on a minimum wage, but now we need to actually, should we arrive at the solution, or should we go on out and leverage and solicit the crowd? Again, it's still some of the mechanisms on how we should be leading. Do we, as the leadership board, want to advance, a couple alternatives, or do all the heavy lifting and then present a solution? Or, okay, guys, this is the rabbit hole we want to go. Stay focused on it, but now let's leverage the crowd and all that creative juice to get us to a solution that everyone's had a part in formulating. These are some of the questions on how how the governance should be enabled, especially as it relates to timeliness. I'm not sure all that stuff scales, but this is the time to experiment with some of those alternatives.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the difference between the second option that you're discussing and, for instance, like the participatory democracy that we had discussed? Because the crowd would be the one that would be building the solution, right?
Well, the difference between this and participatory democracy is that what we're doing as the leadership board is the same, and that we are farming out solutions, but which of those solutions we utilize is decided by us and not by the upvotes of those proposed ideas. So for example, if we made a midweek milestone to find out national minimum wages and internet prices in the most active crowdsourcing countries, that how we utilize that information, we decide. But that we could use the crowd to produce information or to produce ideas.
Another approach would be to say that any motion we approve goes back out publicly for comment, sort of like a request for comment that like the U.S. government would make.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea.
And for say a week or something like that, and then the board comes back to reaffirm its decision a week later or something like that.
It could be very slow, right? So that could be problematic.
Sorry?
It might be slow, right? Like because there would be a lot of iterations.
Yes.
I mean, of all the three tools, this is the format that allows us to move at the quickest pace.
Mm-hmm.
We have a mandate in that we have already been elected, so that certainly gives us some latitude to make some decisions on behalf of the electorate. The question is, do we want to do all this work that's associated with it? And if we want to do all that work and then move the needle fairly quickly and set in motion some very aggressive timelines, then if we're tackling one issue at a time, this is awesome. But in a real world scenario, when there are multiple things happening simultaneously, does it scale? And that's open to conjecture, but probably not. So how real world do we want to experiment? I'm of the belief that we should try to test this with regards to speed. Ultimately we do a lot of the work, but if we can move some very highbrow concepts through fairly quickly and then present it back to the group, we can then take the temperature of the crowd to see, hey, how involved do they feel? How engaged are they? And if they're feeling roughshod, well, then we know then this experiment rendered some sort of solutions that again don't scale. But if we go back to the crowd, then we are so close to participatory and weighted that there's not a lot of differentiation.
Right. So in some sense, another point of view, and if we would say, we made a decision, we publish it back out to the crowd for comment, and if there is an uproar, we can always take it back up the next time we meet.
Correct.
That's a great idea. I love that. I'm not, if I were being a pragmatist leader on this board, I would say, okay, I think we've made some good progress on this issue. The question of Internet things is interesting and thorny. If there's a member of the leadership board or of the community who wants to take that up and make it a concrete proposal, then great. But in the meantime, maybe we should move on to other issues because we've now established a framework there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. So then, is the product, Michael, that we go out to the crowd with is basically we're going to work off a global minimum wage, or should we go to the next step? It's like, okay, we're going to have a global minimum wage, and it is going to be $5 an hour based on this criteria.
I think what we resolved was not a global minimum wage, as far as I understood. But
yeah, the regionally bifurcated global minimum wage.
Yes. So I think what I would do is, put somewhere on the wiki, we voted. Here's the record of here's what we voted for, having a minimum wage on the platform per country that is set by that country's minimum wage. These people voted yes. These people voted no. These people abstained. These people were absent. The arguments pro were this. The arguments con were this, and we made the decision. And this was the prevailing reason. It could be like a 1 to 2 sentences for each of those, just so there's a record. Here's a link to the Hangout.
Okay. And then do we let it just languish there, or then, because there's still a lot of work that can be done around that. Should we encourage then folks to, not send a bunch of wiki links, but to actually dig deeper into creating solutions? How then can we leverage that decision then to either deeper engagement or moving the needle to a more expanded upon solution?
I think. Go ahead.
I think if we can include some of these factors within the worker profile so that it becomes a part of the platform, then I think we are already seeing it being realized.
I think also one of the things we can do is if we just hit some of the big points and make the general decisions now, as we go through further research, we can continue to drill down in these areas. But I feel like we do have some large issues that we can just decide upon early and then iterate from there.
I also like the idea that Allison had said about leveraging the crowd, for instance, to help us maybe do more research. Like maybe we can figure out what are other crowdsourcing platforms using for a global minimum wage.
I was getting some.
But perhaps then, someone on the board that is taking a passionate interest in this could, as we're continuing, as Al mentioned and Michael mentioned, to keep moving and bringing some tangible qualities to some of the bigger items. Those that show those on the leadership board that have a passion for this particular issue, perhaps they can then, put together a study group or start leveraging some of the crowd to really drill down deeper into the solution. It's one thing to do research, but it's now to be purposeful to start creating some content, some solutions, some rules, some of the foundational elements that extend beyond a wiki link. So we can information into knowledge. We can turn the data into process.
Well, I think that this vote, I mean, if we're really doing this as a mock trial, how this would really work, I think we should have a section of the wiki that is basically laws, so to speak, that have been passed by this leadership board or whatever governing structure that basically becomes a record of every.
I love that
The
idea.
platform's official position.
Yeah.
Yep.
I guess you're sort of, in some sense, our secretary, like in a good way, not like the secretary.
Oh no, I look good. Actually, I just shaved my legs. It's cycling season, so they look good.
I mean secretary in the sense of like a secretary of the cabinet, like the vice president of the U.S. Senate, or the keeper of order. I'm wondering if that would maybe mean that you should be the one who's empowered to write up the sort of the.
Yeah, that seems like that dovetails in nicely with being in my role. So yes. So if the role is being offered, I will accept and I will act then as secretary. So in that capacity, I'll take written notes. I will do my best to transcribe whatever has been said, and I will vet it by all you guys before we post it on the wiki, so you can have so we can keep a good eye on any language or any syntax to make sure that we're all in agreement.
I would say at the very minimum,
Yes.
all I would really ask that you do is write up the thing that we voted on as a record. If you want to take notes beyond that, that would be fantastic. But
Okay.
At the very minimum, I think just getting the thing we voted on down seems like the thing that such a board can actually want to do.
Agreed. Done.
Great. So can I ask, where do we go from here? Do you want to do one more of these before Saturday?
I mean, I guess it has more to do with people's availability than anything else. I mean, I'm perfectly happy to do this same time every day except maybe Thursday, right? Or are we going Friday? Okay, yeah, I can do this time any day between now and Saturday. So it's all about how free people are and how much we want to try to get done. I think the next one will be more productive, and maybe we can, via Slack ahead of time, work through what our agenda items are going to be a little more focused going forward.
Yeah.
So it'll give everybody a little time. I think that if we could address the profit non-profit in the next session, I think that would be good. And we'll just continue to encourage people to present ideas on the Meteor. And if something comes up that's particularly interesting or compelling, then we'll hit that as well.
Sounds good. So I'm also available at this same 7:30 Pacific time slot, any evening, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I suggest that we only do one more of these just for my own sanity. But I think at least this is, but in terms of actual day of the week, I'm very open.
Maybe we can also. I have echo.
What was that? Saif, can you repeat that?
Maybe we can also request to the crowd some issues, like just to engage them a little bit more. So, okay, we might discuss if it's going to be a nonprofit, if it's going to be a nonprofit, etc. But we could also maybe ask people to contribute their own issues that they would like us to consider in the agenda. Thoughts? Hello.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think we all agree. Like I said, if we, can just get people contributing and there's something really compelling that kind of comes up to the top from what they're doing, yes, and we can definitely take that on. I would love to be able to access that mechanism of the leadership board also in the experiment, because it's just as much a part of this as anything else, which is, let's just say something comes to the top. How do we address it?
Yeah, how flexible can we be?
Yeah.
I'm game. I think that having a default of discussing profit versus nonprofit is a good thing, because then we definitely have something that's very meaty we need to discuss. And if something else pops up, then we can certainly put that one first.
Cool.
That sounds great.
All right, you want to do Thursday night?
Do you guys want to pick a day now that's good for everyone?
Yeah, I suggest that's a good idea. Girish, do you have, when are you available?
I'm okay with the schedule. Maybe we can discuss it tomorrow morning.
Sure. I'm flexible. I guess I've stated I can do Wednesday or Thursday or Friday. So has Allison. Jay Silver has also said that, I think. So I guess we just need to know Saif and you and Martine, right?
I'm available any day.
Okay.
So tomorrow, profit, nonprofit. Then before we meet up, let's have everyone just do a little deep diving, do a little pre-planning, do a little of their own self investigation, so so we can hit the ground running. Because the second half of this meeting, once we started to get going, was very, very productive. So if we can come pre-planned, do a little, we have the Slack channel, so engage each other accordingly on that channel, and let's crank it out tomorrow with the idea that if we do it as quickly as we did this, that we'll then have some a third and potentially even a fourth idea that we can crank out.
All right. So tentatively tomorrow night, depending on Shuichi's availability. We'll wait to hear from him tomorrow.
Martine says he's available also.
Okay, great.
So I think everybody's in for tomorrow, same time.
I think Shuichi said that he would know in the morning, our time. So it's fine.
No, it is the morning of my time. I'm asking for the same time schedule.
Oh, so you are available at the same time?
Yeah. It's actually morning for me right now.
Okay. Great. So then I think we are.
Great. Thank you all so much. I love this experiment.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. This was awesome. Thank you for your time.
All right, then I think Allison or Saif or anything, this one you can take us offline and we'll catch up tomorrow.